Two things. One, I'm using an old board, so I don't have the grid on it. So yeah, my writing's going to tend to just trend up. That's just the way it works. Always curves up. Anyways, and also trying to find a season for the Ottawa Senators that I go, hey, this was the bad year. To me, this one stood out. Now, they come into the league as an expansion team with 10 wins, and I could have looked at that 10-win team and said, yeah, this is the one that was really disappointing. But I was a Senators fan at the time, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. The 10-win season it was hard to get through, but it was an expansion team, so you're going to have some bad ones. Where it sucked was 1995, because 1995 they had just drafted Brian Berard, and things were looking up, or so it seemed. And before I get to the numbers, I'm going to go ahead and go through this wonderful annual. And again, I highly recommend these. And this is an interesting one because this is when the Rangers signed Gretzky. Everything's going to be great. They're going back to the playoffs. And you can see, too, that it's one of those old-style jerseys with the ear in it. Anyways, I wouldn't buy one of those now. Few good men make world of difference. The Ottawa Senators fired a GM, 2 coaches, and a director of player personnel last season, and now after 4 years of ineptness, they finally look like they have the foundation for a bright future. Now they have to start turning the corner by showing results on the ice. GM Pierre Gauthier, armed with a 5-year contract, has made this team better. Still, can a franchise simply turn around overnight, or is this going to take more practice? Remember, this is a team that has undergone massive changes. Gauthier came in after Randy Sexton was fired and dismissed, and coach Dave Allison shortly after, replacing him with a solid hockey man in Jacques Martin. And it makes you wonder, what were they thinking? Serious question. And this was a problem we had with Ottawa up until Pierre Gauthier came in. So to start the season, they lose 2, they win 2. Not bad. They lose 1, they win 3 in a row. So they're 5-3 at that point during the season. It's like, hey, maybe they're going to go somewhere. No, they lose 2 in a row, they win 1, then they lose 9 in a row, and that was when any and all optimism disappeared quickly. They tied their next game, they lost their next 4, meaning they were winless in 14. It was a long month and a bit. They won 1, then they lost 8, meaning they had 1 win in 23 games. So when you talk about teams going through dry spells right now, I present to you the 4th year Ottawa Senators. This was year 4. They were supposed to be getting better. This was the best record they had ever posted, proving that this team was an absolute unmitigated disaster. They won 1 and then they lost 11 in a row. 11. So they lose 9, they lose 4, they lose 8, they lose 11. Holy crap, this is bad. They tie 1, they win 1, then they lost 5 more. 1-2, tied 1, lost 1, won 1, lost 7. 1-3, 2 of those by shutout over Vancouver and Tampa. Lost 2, tied 1, lost 4, tied 1, won 2, lost 3. And then they won on the 82nd game of the year in a game that didn't mean anything to them, but in that last game of the year, they defeated the New Jersey Devils in a game that meant a lot to the New Jersey Devils. All the Devils had to do was win that last game of the year against Ottawa, and they make the playoffs to defend their Stanley Cup title, and the Senators beat them 5-2. I may have had a good laugh that night about that. Now, what's interesting is, in the midst of all this, Brian Berard's drafted by the Ottawa Senators. Refuses to sign, refuses to report. I'm not going to be a Senator is the word right away. And this is another, remember, this isn't that long after Lindros said he wasn't going to play for the Nordiques, and the Nordiques are seen as a franchise that's on its way to Colorado, and this was the season, of course, that they debuted in Colorado. So while we've got that in the background that the team's gone to Colorado, we've got Berard now refusing to report to the beleaguered Ottawa Senators, who are just moving into their new stadium, the Palladium. The Corel Center had held them well, but again, finding an arena for Ottawa is nothing new. And now that I hear, all this talk about, they need a new arena, it's like, of course they do, because they're Ottawa. That year, they finished with an 18-59-5 record. They were 47 points out of the playoffs. 47 points. And what's sad is this is probably the closest they got. Now, the season previous, They only had 9 wins, but it was a lockout shortened 48-game schedule. So if you look at it, going from 9 wins in 48 games to 18 and 82 is an improvement, but incremental at best. But there was some good news in and amongst the bad. So I'll start with the bad because we'll get the bad out of the way first. They were at the bottom of the league in goals with 191. They were at the bottom of the league with even strength goals with 132. They were at the bottom of the league in power play percentage at 12.3. The fact that the Nashville Predators, at the time I'm recording this, have a lower power play percentage than that is really weird, because this team had 53 power play goals that year, and that was also the lowest. And by today's standards, that's not bad. So things really change over 20-some years. This, of course, was kind of a big deal. Gauthier takes over on December 6th of 1995 after Randy Sexton's fired. Randy Sexton was maybe a great guy, but he was brutal for the Ottawa Senators as a general manager. He brought in the wrong guys. None of it worked. He brought in Quinn. He brought in Straka. He brought in a bunch of guys, and it just didn't work on the ice. So the first thing that Randy Sexton did with this team that's an absolute disaster, January 23rd, 1996, a little over a month after he took over, he traded Dan Quinn to the Philadelphia Flyers for future considerations. At the time, Dan Quinn had 24 points in 28 games and was their number 1 scorer. And when asked about it, his answer was, it doesn't really matter. Basically along the lines of Quinn was maybe a problem for them behind the scenes and they needed to move him out. Culture change, I believe, was maybe thrown in there. And January 23rd, the same day, they traded Brian Berard and Martin Straka to the Islanders. Beaupre got moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They acquired Damien Rhodes and Wade Redden that day. So Rhodes came in from Toronto, Redden came in from the Islanders, and if we look back at that now, they win that trade going away. Wade Redden added to that blue line. Fantastic. Berard would go on to have a decent career, but he was not as good as Wade Redden. January 26th of 1996, he trades Brad Larson to Colorado for Jani Laukkanen. And Laukkanen, it's easy to forget who he was or any of that, but he went on to have a pretty decent career as well. And it was a decent pickup for Gauthier. So Gauthier's making the right moves off the ice. And he's not just trying to bring in fixes. And notice that Straka and Quinn, 2 of the guys that Sexton brought in, are already gone a month into his job, which made Ottawa fans feel better. Also making Ottawa fans feel better, their leading scorer that year was Daniel Alfredsson. He won the Calder. He had 26 goals, 35 assists, 61 points in 82 games that year. That was hope for the future. And the good news was Yashin had been holding out for a while. Sexton came in and had the attitude of, we're just going to fix this. Or Gauthier came in with the attitude of, we're just going to fix this. Sexton would have just let him sit and rot. And, of course, Ottawa fans probably agree with both. 46 games played for Yashin after he came back. 15 goals, 24 assists, 39 points. Yashin would be a lightning rod for this team for years after that holdout. And I think the fact that he held out when he had a signed contract, saying he wanted more money, that said a lot to fans about his dedication to team and such. It doesn't really happen anymore. Pretty sure it's not allowed under the CBA, and you have Yashin to thank for that. Cunnyworth, 17 goals, 19 assists in 81 games. Randy Cunnyworth was never known as an offensive player. However, he was their team captain that season, and he was pretty solid in that job. I liked Cunnyworth as captain. Steve Duchene, 62 games played, 12 goals, 24 assists, 36 points. Again, Duchene wasn't as good for Ottawa as he had been in previous seasons for other teams, but he wasn't bad either. And this was coming off of Norm McIver had been their best defenseman as well at points. No really big stars. Of course, Radek Bonk, 76 games played, 16 goals, 19 assists, 35 points for Bonk in those 76 games. Camera shook because Shadow stepped on the base for the computer. Bonk ends up with 35 points in 76 games on his way to a decent career. I think that one of the turning points was when Bonk finally realized that potential, but there wasn't a whole lot of indication of that. Although 16 goals was an upswing for him. Chorsky, 72 games played, 15 goals, 14 assists for him. Straka had 43 games in Ottawa before he got traded. 9 goals, 16 assists, 25 points, and I don't think he ever fit in. Other guys of interest, of course, Dimitra, who was a star in the making. Nobody had any idea what was to come from him. 31 games, 7 goals, 10 assists for him. And Alexander Daig, 50 games, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points. Daig was done as an Ottawa Senator at that stage of the game. And really, honestly, once you bring in Jacques Demers, he's not going to put up with a lot of crap. And that's really why, when you look at the coaching records, Bowness had a 6-13 record when he was fired. I love Rick Bowness as an assistant. Don't love him as a head coach. Dave Allison, 2 wins, 22 losses, and a tie. Yeah, I honestly, Allison might be at the top of a list of worst coaches. He's close, and honestly, I need to do a video on coaches with the worst records and coaches that just didn't last for Dave Allison type reasons. Demers had a record of 10-24-4, which is better than Allison, but it's right about in line with Bowness. So it's not like when Demers took over, they got a whole lot better. It's just that Allison wasn't the coach anymore. Seemed to be the big change in Ottawa. Like, well, whatever happens, that 11-game losing streak under Allison is forgotten, kind of, sort of. And it was important too, because when you look at their goaltenders, Damien Rhodes, after he came over, had a record of 10-22-4, 2.77 goals against, 906 save percentage. He'd been stuck behind Felix Potvin in Toronto. So moving him into the starter's job in Ottawa turned out to be pretty solid for him. And of course, there was that Lalime kid that was coming in too. Beaupre, 6 wins, 23 losses, 3.73 goals against, 877 save percentage. I remember when this trade happened thinking, why would Toronto want Beaupre? Beaupre's done. And he was. He didn't play very many games for Toronto, and he was finished. And Mike Bales on there with 2 wins, 14 losses, and a tie. 4.15 goals against, 871 save percentage. Probably a great guy. Didn't have a great goaltending career in the NHL. But this was the last season before they started actually becoming a good team. And it was probably the hardest one to get through as a Sens fan, because they were supposed to get better this year. They had acquired Berard as their number 1 draft pick. Berard was supposed to be kind of the fix on that blue line. Their blue line was a disaster. Their goaltending was supposed to be better than what it was. And, it just didn't work on any level. So under Demers, under Gauthier, they got that respect and they started getting better. But the results wouldn't show up until the season after. So there you go. Truly awful seasons. I picked the 1995-96 Ottawa Senators because while there were 4 bad seasons there, and I could have easily picked the first year and talked about how, these players just, were hardworking players, but there was no top-end talent. It's an expansion team. What do you expect? The 90s expansion teams didn't have a whole lot of talent to choose from. This, to me, was the most disappointing season as a Sens fan. But if you're old enough to remember those 90s Sens teams, let me know which one was your most disappointing in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.